Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our latest project car, the 1994 Bentley Brooklands, aka Ron Burgundy, aka the cheapest Bentley in the country, aka the cheapest Bentley in the world. If you missed part one of our buying process, make sure you click the link down below to find out how we bought this car. But for now, it's time to get serious. It's time for Ron's review. Let's do this.
Okay, a little bit of a history lesson. The Brooklands is actually two separate cars by Bentley. One was a coupe designed to replace the Arnage in 2008, and the other was this one, a four-door, full-sized saloon designed to replace the Mulsanne in 1992. And okay, some people might say this Brooklands is the less desirable of the two, but I say, shut up, it's a Bentley. In fact, what you're looking at here is a budget version of the famous Bentley Turbo R. And that means it uses the same massive 6.75 litre V8, so it should fly.
Sadly, Ron doesn't have launch control, but you can still lick the stamp, as it were. Hold it on the brakes, boot full of throttle, send it. Yeah, that is not as bad as I expected. All right, it's solid, but not spectacular. That's all right. That's all right. Good lad. So, slight correction on the engine. It's not the exact same engine you get in the big bad Bentley Turbo R. This one doesn't actually have the giant turbo, which means it's nowhere near as powerful. It makes 245 horsepower, which works out to be about 36 horsepower per litre. And, well, that's not a lot, is it? These big, low compression V8s aren't particularly savage when it comes to big power, but there's a decent amount of torque. The only problem is, Ron is very heavy. Very heavy. Ron weighs 2,430 kilograms, which is more than a modern SUV. And the reason for that is that it uses a conventional steel monocoque. And it's full of luxury features, which I'll show you in just a second. Okay, Bentley have paid some lip service to weight saving by adding aluminium doors, aluminium bonnet, and an aluminium boot lid, but that's like putting carbon fiber ears on an elephant. It's too little, too late, the damage has already been done. But the upshot is that the whole car feels so sturdy. For example, this waterfall grille at the front, super solid. You get plastic grills on modern Bentleys, and then you've got this steel valve caps. Now, they could have gone for plastic, but they went for steel instead, and that presumably adds not an inconsiderable amount of weight. And then these doors, which I know they're made of aluminium, but these handles are so sturdy. And listen to this for a reassuring shut noise. Wow, solid. Unfortunately, not everything is as solid as that. Have a look at this rear bumper, which looks like it's been in a bit of a fight. Problem is, the Brooklands is so long that they don't fit into a normal garage. And owners forget that, park their cars in a garage, close the doors, and the doors slice the rear bumpers, and you end up with damage like that. You wouldn't expect a Bentley to lose a fight with a simple garage, but, you know, we can't all be tough all the time. Right, let me show you inside of Ron. This is probably the best bit of the car by far. I love the way it looks. It just feels super luxurious. I'm not a massive fan of wood. I probably wouldn't get it on a modern car, but take yourself back to 1994 and this wood up here would have been absolutely big pimping. Plus, look at the mats. They are so plush, so full. It kind of almost tempts you to ride around bare feet just to enjoy the sumptuous nature of those mats. Let me show you around the car. So in the doors, you've got these 4 individual controls for the electric windows. Incidentally, these electric window mechanisms use a chain, which seems like adding unnecessary weight. But again, Bentley don't really seem to care about that sort of thing. They're also a bit confusing because none of them are labeled, but over time, you do get used to it. Then in the center, you've got loads and loads of buttons. A couple of my favorites include the temperature controls. So the upper portion controls the temperature of the upper vents in the dash, and this lower disc controls the temperature for your feet, which is nice and handy, especially if you are riding around with bare feet. Then above that, you've got a row of buttons for locking the windows, turning on the air conditioner, your hazard lights, a two-tone horn, which I showed you in the first video, but check this out. Apparently it's called a town and country horn. So one is slightly less obnoxious for when you're driving through town, and one is really obnoxious for when you're driving through country and you want to alert people and animals to get out of your way. Also, this car has fully electric seats, so they move you forward, backward, they adjust the angle and also the height of the seat. It also has a memory function for both of the front seats. So one could be for you and the other three could be for, I don't know, another family member and your two chauffeurs maybe. It seems like overkill. And there's also seat heaters for both front seats, one with a medium heat and one with a high heat. The last thing I want to show you are these gauges up here on the dashboard, specifically the fuel gauge. What you might have noticed is that it has the fuel reading and a min oil reading. Why is that? Well, when you turn the car on and push the oil refuel button down here on the center console, what it does is it shows you how much oil is in the car, and are well below the minimum right now. So excuse me while I rectify that.
It turned out that after checking the dipstick manually, the actual oil level was fine and that Ron wasn't hemorrhaging precious oil. But it did need a tiny bit of a top up, so I chucked in some 10W40 that was laying around in the car when I bought it. The rest of the engine, it has to be said, looks pretty sound, especially for something that's done a sizable 140,000 miles. Ron is in good nick, I hope. Now, back to the interior.
Right, now that's sorted and I'm covered in oil, let me show you the back of the car, which is, to me, one of the best bits about the vehicle. There isn't a lot of legroom though. I've actually moved my front seat forward to give me a bit more space to work with. And I'm not impressed by the headroom either. I mean, look at that. Given how big the Brooklands is, you'd expect a little bit more space to play with. But there's lots of creature comforts. For example, look at these footrests, which don't do an awful lot really, but they make you feel a bit more special, I guess. Plus the carpet's nice and plush back here. You also get ashtrays and individual cigarette lighters, plus this really ornate looking grab handle. This is one of the best grab handles I've ever seen in any vehicle. It is the best, quite frankly. This has never been topped. Overkill, but I like it. And then you've got this armrest in the center console. No cup holders, but it does contribute to making you feel more comfortable. And then there are these vanity mirrors which live just behind your head. Now, these are in a really awkward place and they only give you a really strange angle of your face, which means you always look weird when you look into them, but they look good and they work fairly well. One other thing I want to show you, down here you've got these weird little buckles and their only purpose is to clip the seatbelt buckle into place to stop it flapping about. Genius. So, what's it like to drive? Well, it's a Bentley, so it drives like a Bentley. It feels, even though it's made in 1994, it feels like a very modern car in terms of the comfort and refinement levels. When you get in, you get this big leather steering wheel in front of you. Obviously, having all this leather and wood makes it feel even more luxurious, but there's a couple of little problems. For example, when you first get in the car, this steering wheel is absolutely massive and it can be a bit tricky to slide your body underneath the steering wheel. And what ends up happening is that you sometimes hurt your thighs when you get in and out of the car, but once you're in and you're in place and you set off, then it's all good. The other thing I have a little bit of a problem with are these seats. Look at the headrests. Look how far back my head goes. That is absolutely ridiculous. You wouldn't want to drive around like that, would you? So if you're trying to rest your head, for example, then these are not ideal. In fact, they're less than ideal because if someone were to ram into the back of you, you're definitely going to get whiplash. That's not good design. As for the ride, well, it's quite good. It uses this hydraulic self-leveling suspension which soaks up the worst of the bumps. It really does feel like you're kind of floating along on a cloud, which is exactly what you want from a big old barge like this one. The wheels and tires also play a big role in the refinement and comfort levels. Here's a quick bit of trivia for you. When the Brooklands first came out, it used a 15-inch alloy wheel and a 15-inch tire, obviously. Now, the problem with that was that it needed a very specific type of rubber. In other words, there weren't many 15-inch tires that could cope with a car that went damn near 150 miles an hour and weighed 2.5 tons. So, in the modern age, if you were looking to buy a replacement tire for your Brooklands, you were very restricted to basically one type of tire, which is quite pricey. So what people tend to do is to buy a 4x4 tire and fit it to the Brooklands because that tire can manage the speed and the weight. Sadly, those tires aren't very refined. So the solution to that, according to a lot of people, is to buy a 17-inch wheel, which would give you a lot more flexibility and choice in terms of what tire you could buy. That's what the previous owner of Ron chose to do. Unfortunately, that person also chose to fit 4x4 off-road tires, which is not the perfect choice when it comes to refinement. It's not bad, but at motorway speeds, it's not the best it could be. What's the steering like? Well, it's not bad, but as I said before, I'm not a huge fan of this particular steering wheel. It's big, it feels a bit too hard and a bit uncomfortable, if you ask me. Plus, in this particular example, I'm not sure if this is a common thing in all Brooklands, but the steering wheel is actually angled off to the right. It's more facing this window than it is me, which means I'm driving a bit like that, which is, well, it's not great, is it? The handling is pretty acceptable though. It's a big old lump, it weighs 2.5 tons, but when you find yourself in a corner, it actually feels way more composed than you might expect. There's quite a lot of body roll. It's actually, yeah, it does have a lot of body roll, but it does settle down pretty quickly and it's predictable in the amount that it kind of articulates up onto each side. It's actually a surprising amount of fun when you do want to push it through corners, but the fact that it doesn't have an enormous amount of power means that the way you drive this car is just to chill out, relax and take it easy through the corners. Now, the gearbox is an old GM 3-speed unit and it's something I want to show you actually, so I'll just pull in right now. It's got a weird little quirk to it that not many people know about. Whenever I take this somewhere and get it valet parked, they can never figure out how to put it in gear. What you've got to do is to lift the gear stick up and then backwards to put it into gear, otherwise it won't do it. Once you're on the move, what's the gear change like? Second gear is quite long, but when it gets into third, you get a little punch. It's not the most refined box in the world. You can kind of see why modern automatics have so many gears now, 7, 8, 9 gears. And having 3 does make the car feel a little bit more jerky when it has to change gear. But it's all right. So on the whole, yeah, I'm well happy with Ron. It's a brilliant car. It's a bit on the big side, but I've been daily in this thing most days and it's such a pleasure to drive. You get so much attention. People are always looking at it and smiling. And when you drive it, you can't help but smile either. And that to me is the mark of a brilliant car. So, seal of approval. But what's next? Well, next, we're gonna get it looked at by professionals. We're gonna take it to Bentley's HQ and have them go over it with a fine-tooth comb to figure out whether there are any issues we might have to deal with and what we can do with the car going forward. So if you guys have any suggestions for what we should do with Ron, leave them down below. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you soon.